I don't know
I'm
why
ready
we're
to
gonna do this
cry.
to ourselves. I even have a video.
Well, it's
Oh,
such a peppy chapter and all.
Yeah, thanks for that, Jenna.
thank you.
Yeah, we didn't time that one right. We should have done 2 chapters for this one.
Yeah, I mean seriously. All right, this is the last ever time that Walt was on TV, about like 45 days before his death, something like that. Um, that's really a sad way to start it, so I apologize. um, let's see. Walt's final year starts off with him being the Grand Marshal, so that was a cool thing in the Rose Parade. Though his health was failing, most people did not know how bad his health had gotten. His lungs were not healthy at all due to his unfiltered smoking habit. Walt had plenty going on that world, including plenty going on that year, including Walt Disney World, the Mineral Springs Resort, and opening CalArts. So he had 3 huge projects going on besides just keeping Disneyland and his film industry afloat. So it's a lot to handle for any one person. Walt kept working and extremely hard despite his illness. He was convinced he would whip the cancer despite his planning telling people that he was going to whip the cancer. And but besides that, he was also kind of taking care of things that he needed to take care of with people, telling people what he wanted to tell them and doing things like that, just in case he would pass, sort of planning ahead. He did have surgery to remove the lung because it was so bad. Walt started writing letters to people to make sure things were said that needed to be said. After leaving the hospital, he, of course, doesn't go to home or to relax or vacation. He goes straight to the studio. Walt, in his last time with Roy, was planning, well, Walt was on his last night with Roy, was planning his Walt Disney World resort. So that was his like last thing, was pretty much working. Like Roy was there the night before he died. They're working, they're planning the resort, they're doing things on the ceiling. I mean, the guy was living his dream right up to the last moment, which is, you know, I guess something we all can aspire to do, doing something you really love like that to the last moment. So we talk about Sklar's reaction. It was interesting to hear about it again because we, of course, just did that book. Roy rubbing his brother's foot and saying, "Well, kid, I guess it's the end of the road," is the saddest thing I think I've ever spoke. Very sad. And then, of course, my quote is Lily saying in response to whether or not Disneyland should open, Walt would want the show to go on. And of course, we all know that's 100% true. The guy, that was his life, so I'm sure he would want that. The lesson of this chapter was to accept your mortality. Remember, your legacy is important. Walt is one of the men with the best exits of anybody in the history of the world. He, you know, is being kind to everybody. Everybody knows what he's about. Everybody's still to this day benefiting from his dream and his happiness. And we can all have just a fraction of that legacy. We'll be good. We'll be better off. The world will be better off as well. So that was all I got, and that was pretty good. Last little, got right in the end there. So, who else wants to do their crying? Let's start with Judy.
So I thought the most emotional chapter was the last chapter. There's a lot of crying that I did on that one. But no, this one just wasn't as long, but it was just as emotional, if not more. Towards the end of the book, or the chapter, one of the sections is called "The Saddest Thing I've Ever Seen," and that was after Walt's passing. Roy looks around the studio and bows his head in sadness before he got into his car, it is just as sad. It's a little bit more sad than the last words he spoke to Walt's body, I guess, is because, you know, it was his realization that his little brother is gone, you know, and everything that they've built is now just on him. You know, it's not just Walt and Roy anymore. So that was a really sad thing to hear explained through someone else's perspective. Also kind of surprised that John Wayne lived 15, 16 years with one lung. So, and you know, back in those days, people smoked regularly. So the fact that, you know, such different outcomes on the same illness and the same cancer that affected two very different people, and again it affected them very differently, is still, it's amazing just how different bodies are and how it affects them. In terms of the lesson for this chapter, which is, being aware and accepting your own mortality, it's scary to think, like, yes, in some ways I try to work and be the type of person that will influence others so that there's still some type of positive impact I've made well after I'm gone. But at the same time, just the idea of not existing is scary. But that's probably why I don't think too far into the future. I don't plan for anything 6 months in advance, because it's just a scary idea to plan for something when we don't know if we will still be alive that far into the future, And to me, it is far into the future to think about 6 months from now as opposed to next week, So that I kind of, I guess, follow that lesson without realizing I follow that lesson, because I am aware of my mortality. I'm afraid of it, but afraid of it or not, we're all mortal and we are going to pass on. So we should probably get used to the idea and just have it be part of our lives so it's not so scary. That's all I have.
It's going to be a really dark book club, you guys. I can tell right now. Thanks again, Jenna. Let's have Lauren go next.
Okay, so like I was saying before, we started actual book club, that it's really hard. Like maybe I'm a robot. Maybe it's true that it's hard for me to like cry and really get emotional. But I mean, you could still feel the weight of the chapter. And I think what was interesting was the one passage, when I look at the last days of Walt Disney, I'm impressed with the courageous way he faced the end of his life. There was no self-pity or anger. There may well have been fear. Anyone would be afraid of death. But when Walt faced death, he set an example for us all in how to live and how to die. And I think what's like really interesting is the fact that there was still so much that Walt could do and Walt had left in him and his creative side, and how everyone, like the chapter says, like the show must go on, and how everyone carried that legacy and it lives on to this day. So I think that although he's gone, like he's still kind of working through all of us cast members and people at studios and just all over the company. I just think that it was amazing to kind of to read how all of this like tied in at the end of his life. It's really sad, but also really inspiring too.
Yeah, I definitely like what you said about, we're all keeping his legacy alive. That's very important to remember. Let's see, Haley, what did you get out of this besides tears?
Let's see. Well, first, when they were talking just about like the last year of his life and how hard he was working and he just didn't stop. Of course, like the theater arts kid in me just had like 15 different like Hamilton lyrics in my head because that's my life. But overall, I thought the chapter was really well written. I hate to say like, oh, I liked when they mentioned this funeral thing, but like, it was interesting how they put how Walt hated going to funerals, and then they went back and touched like about his funeral, and it kind of like made it come full circle in that aspect. And then it was also really interesting that the author interviewed a bunch of different like people who either knew Walt or maybe didn't know him and just knew of him, and how his death and his life just like touched everyone in such a like impactful way. And then lastly, when he at the beginning of the chapter, when he told Bill Pete about like oh, make sure that the Disney like kind of lives on like well after I'm gone. And, you know, years later, here it is, thriving mostly. And that lives through like all of us. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Hamilton too. So there you go. Something for you there. Yeah, no, that's I mean, that's all we can do now at this point is just keep his legacy alive. But even though I'm mad at you, Jenna, about it, this has made me realize what I am keeping alive. So I will let you speak on it now because I'm not mad at you anymore.
Well, for me, when I read this chapter, it's interesting reading it twice because there was also a few years in between when I read it before and when I read it now. And to be honest, the thing that I didn't remember from the book at all is how much the religious aspect, totally did not even realize that was in the book in any way, shape, or form. Not that that's a bad thing. I just didn't remember it was there. So like the lessons that I remembered were in the book. Like the one I took away from just like from memory, like years later, was not about what happened during his death, but the fact that he was still so determined to build Epcot. That for him was like he didn't stop. And to go to Haley's point, the thing that keeps going into my mind is he writes like he's running out of time, like he can't stop, like he needs to keep going to that next stop. And that's for the fact that he's still like his dying wish was like build Epcot, like there's more I see in the future, you can still run with this and take this. I think that was like the biggest lesson I took away from it, that it doesn't like you can still pass on whatever dream you have and you can carry it out through everybody else, like even if you're not around, because he still wanted to make a point in like passing on where his mind was, even though he knew that he would never see it. He'd never see Disney World. He'd never see like where it was going, but he made sure to pass it off to the right people in hopes that the dream would continue. So that's what I got out of it.
Yeah, no, man, I guess if only we can all do that, huh? Just work up to the last minute like that and put our dreams through. What about you, Jessica? What'd you take out of it?
So first, I'm going to do the sign, as we always do. To continue with the theater trend, we're going to do show, as in like an entertainment show. So you have 2 thumbs up, and they come towards you, kind of like that. That's the sign for show, and it's about at your chest level. So show, the show goes on. And then for me, other than it being sad, one of the stories that really stuck with me is when Disney was open and it was the premiere of the Christmas parade and those cast members before they went on stage, and then it was snowing. Like that just was so magical. And the fact that the day was gray and it was a cold snap, it just fit so perfectly with the passing of Walt and the somber attitude there and people wanting to be there to be close to Walt and cast members openly grieving and crying. Like that was just so special that happened, as sad as it was. And the fact that it snowed before they did the debut of their Christmas parade and they did it anyway, instead of saying, you know what, we're too sad, we can't do it. The show went on and they got out there and they created that magic. And for me, one of my first memories is when my 5th birthday at Disneyland with the fireworks and the snow. And at that point, I don't think I'd ever seen snow before. So it was just such a magical moment for me. And it just connected when I read that part in the book. And for a quote that kind of stuck out to me, it doesn't necessarily connect with the chapter, but it was at the beginning and it was part of a larger quote from Walt. And it says, "But I reject luck. I feel every person creates his own determination by discovering his best aptitudes and following them undeviatingly." And I guess it kind of does connect with just continuing to work and continuing to focus and working on your aptitudes and following your passions. And I just, like all of you guys, it was amazing that he just kept working and pretending like everything was fine, but he knew that other people noticed that he wasn't fine. And so he made the point to speak his mind and show his support and his love for his fellow cast members and really show them how much he cared about them. Since he was so short in life, he wouldn't necessarily give praise of people, but you knew he appreciated what you did. He made more of an effort to tell them how special they were. And I think that's important, and something we can take away is to make sure to tell people every day what you notice in them and appreciate in them, because it really impacted them and meant a lot to them that he did that. But yeah, this was a rough chapter, but I think there's lots you can take away from it, and it was a good one.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up about people were celebrating and mourning and maybe trying to forget the sadness by being at Disneyland. I think that's something that we're going to be experiencing with even after COVID. People are going to be trying to forget about COVID and, trying to get over some, bad times in our country. So we're going to be, hopefully, the people that are going to be making sure that happens for them. So that's gonna be cool for us. But yeah, it definitely was something where I was like, wow, I can't believe they opened it. And then it was like, oh, people were using that as their way to mourn Walt. And I was like, okay, I get it. Like that was their way to mourn Walt. It's really cool.
And the cool part too is that they allowed the cast members to have those moments instead of being like, slap a smile on it. Like you gotta be happy. They let them openly cry and be sad because Walt was so important, and that was okay, which I thought was really cool.
So I do think we're gonna do one chapter this week from the looking at it. So it'll be chapter 14. Yes, 14.
Yes.
So I have a few of you here. I wanted to ask you guys a question. Me and Jessica looked at a book. We're only 2 chapters away from finishing this one, I think, or maybe 3. I don't know if we have time and we continue to be on furlough. I have no idea if that'll be true or not, but if it is, if you guys want to try to do this book we found that was called Dare to Lead. I don't know if anybody can see that or not. It was by Renee Brown.
That one, Brene Brown's like one of my favorite people on the planet, and it's a very, very good book.
That
Awesome.
sounds good. Yeah.
So it's not Disney at all, but we were kind of like we've done Disney a lot. I don't want to say the other thing.
She dives into your psychology. She's definitely like goes into the middle of your brain and tells you how you operate. It's very, very good.
Brave work, tough conversations, whole hearts, and I think that
Do it.
I'm down with it. Again, we can always do this once the park opens too, but at least until the park opens again, we can be trying this one. So Dare to Lead. I think it was like $12 on Audible. I'm sure it's probably similar for a book to get digitally or order it now if you need to. But yeah, and it's got some good sized chapters. Like they're like 45 minutes pretty much each. If you do the Audible version, so that's a good thing. Okay, good. I'm glad. I'm glad that we didn't know you had read it, but
I totally forgot.
She's
about
read
it.
everything.
I really have read a lot. When it comes down to it, chances are you read it just because I read all that stuff. But Brene Brown, she definitely approaches leadership extremely differently than a lot of other people. I strongly recommend not playing a drinking game at the times she uses the word vulnerable. It's not every other word. Because the whole thing is about teaching you to be vulnerable and being okay with like, I made a mistake and like,